Maskil le asa ha'azina ami torati hatu azanekem li imere pi. My people, give ear to my Torah. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. Eftaka b'mashal pi abiyah tidot mani kedem. I open my mouth in a parable. I utter riddles of old. Tehillim, Psalm chapter 78, verse 1. Yahuwshuwa of Nazareth, who is the Messiah of Israel, is the greatest and most influential teacher to ever walk the earth. That is because he is the word of YaHuWaH, the eternal one. YaHuWaH is the creator of heaven and earth. He is the one who spoke all into existence. And Yahuwshuwa is the embodiment of the word of YaHuWaH. He is the word made flesh. Yahuwshuwa is the Ben YaHuWaH. He is the son of YaHuWaH, the eternal one. Therefore, we must shema, listen and obey the words of the Messiah of Israel, because he taught concerning Malchut Hashemayim, the reign, the kingdom of the heavens, which is at hand. That is the kingdom, Malchut YaHuWaH, the kingdom of YaHuWaH, his Father. And he taught the multitudes concerning the reign of the heavens using mishlim, or parables and proverbs. The term mashal literally means a proverb, a parable, or a metaphoric discourse. Yahuwshuwa used various analogies describing earthly events to disclose heavenly secrets. And these were the parables that he used. The term mashal also means a poem. When you read the Hebrew and the Aramaic of Yahuwshuwa's poems, or literally his parables, you will see that he was a master poet. And he used riddles to explain things that had been tucked away as mysteries in the foundations of the physical world, things that YaHuWaH had embedded in the earth, so that we would see the patterns in the earthly and understand the spiritual heavenly matters of his eternal kingdom. And Yahuwshuwa was a master teacher. He was the most wise of every teacher that had ever been. Yahuwshuwa, because he is the word of YaHuWaH, the embodiment of the Torah, the instructions and principles of YaHuWaH, the eternal one. And we give praise for this reason. It is important to understand these things. The term mashal not only means a metaphoric discourse, a parable, or a proverb, but it comes from the Hebrew word mashal, which is written the exact same way as mashal. They are actually interchangeable words. And when we look at the term mashal, we will see that mashal literally means to rule and reign over, implying the dominion that a king has over his subjects and over his dominion. Therefore, Yahuwshuwa used parables, mashal, to mashal, rule and reign over the people. The very term mashal then implies an intellectual superiority, because the one who gives the parable, the one who gives the proverb, the wise saying, the one who gives the metaphoric discourse, he is demonstrating his ruling over his audience, because he is giving them lessons that they must then interpret. This is important because these very parables are all about the reign of the heavens, the kingdom of the heavens. The two concepts, the concept of parable and ruling and reigning, are therefore intertwined in the Hebrew mind and cannot be separated. And for this reason, Yahuwshuwa taught in parables. His students, his Talmudim, which are called disciples, asked him, "Why do you address the crowds in parables?" In Matthew or Matthew chapter 13. In verse 13 we read, "Because of this I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in them the prophecy of Yeshayahu, who is Isaiah, is completely filled, which says, hearing you shall hear and by no means understand, and seeing you shall see and by no means perceive. For the heart of this people has become thickened, and their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their heart and turn back, and I heal them." This is in Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 6. Yahuwshuwa is quoting from the prophet Yeshayahu, the prophet of YaHuWaH, who is saying that the people of Yisrael had become void of hearing and understanding. So Yahuwshuwa is saying that the parables, therefore, are to act as a mechanism to filter out those who are a part of the kingdom versus those who are not, those who have ears to hear and those who do not. Yahuwshuwa made it very clear not everyone would understand these parables because they are parables concerning the Malchut, YaHuwah, the kingdom, the reign of YaHuwah. He gave these parables for his elect, for the B'nai HaMalchut, which are the children of the reign. And we therefore must study these words because they are imperative to understanding the day and age which we now live in, because we are on the threshing floor. Yahuwshuwa will soon return, and he taught in parables concerning the timing of his return. Matithyahu, Matthew chapter 13, beginning in verse 24. Another parable he put before them, saying, the reign of the heavens has become like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares or darnel among the wheat and went away. And when the blade sprouted and bore fruit, then the tares or darnel also appeared. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? From where then does it have the tares or the darnel? And he said to them, a man, an enemy, did this. And the servant said to him, do you wish then that we go and gather them up? But he said, no, lest while you gather up the darnel, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest, I shall say to the reapers, first, gather the darnel and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my granary. Yahuwshuwa gave this parable 2,000 years ago in the land of Yehuda, which is called Judea. The Yahudim, who were called the Jews, had been overthrown by the Romans, making Judea or Yehuda an occupied territory within the Roman Empire. Now that is important to note, because when we go back and look at Roman historical records, we will see that the scenario which Yahuwshuwa is illustrating in the parable was actually a very common one, insomuch that it had been made illegal throughout all of the Roman provinces to sow any darnel amongst a wheat field. This was a high offensive crime. So Yahuwshuwa was using a scenario that the people in that region, within the Mediterranean region, were very familiar with. They had seen this happen one too many times. Therefore, it had become illegal. So when Yahushua's disciples and all the crowds are hearing this message, they resonate with this concept. They had seen this before. Perhaps it had even happened to their own wheat fields or to the wheat fields of their loved ones. So they understood what was happening. Again, they lived 2,000 years ago in an agrarian society. An agrarian society is a society whose economy is made up of agriculture, livestock, and the maintaining of farmlands. Today, in the 21st century, we live in an industrial society in the West, completely divorced from these concepts of sowing and reaping. Man no longer sticks seeds in the ground with his hand or with hand tools. He uses large machines. He uses huge amounts of chemical fertilizers. He uses pesticides that are made by chemical compounds. None of these which naturally occur in the world today, because man has become too smart for the ancient ways. And this is in of itself a parable that has much to do with the time that we live in. Because not only has all this happened, but we see that wheat is a far cry today from what it was in the days of Yahuwshuwa. The heirloom wheat that was in the land of Israel was very, very nutritious for you. But today we have hybridized wheat, and people are using not only the hybridized wheat, but again, they're using the chemical fertilizers along with chemical pesticides such as Roundup. The FDA actually allows for wheat farmers to spray their fields with Roundup before harvest. So there's so many terrible things that are happening in our agricultural society today, and it is not sustainable. But what we see in the Torah, what we see in the ancient ways are, and therefore we need to understand these ancient methods and understand these ancient ways so that we can understand the parables and the life of Yahuwshuwa the Messiah, and understand what it means that a good man went forth and he had good seed, Tob seed, Zerah Tob, and he planted it in his field and he was sabotaged with darnel. What is the difference between wheat and darnel? Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 7. For YaHuWaH your Elohim is bringing you into a good land, a land of streams of water, of fountains and springs that flow out of valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land in which you eat bread without scarcity, in which you do not lack at all. Tehillim, Psalm chapter 81, verse 16. He would feed them with the finest of wheat, and with the honey from the rock I would satisfy you. Tehillim, Psalm 147, verse 14. Who makes shalom or peace in your borders. He satisfies you with the finest wheat. Wheat in Hebrew is chita. It is one of the oldest and most important of the cereal crops. Wheat can refer to any of several species of cereal grasses of the genus Triticum and their edible grains. Wheat grain has been used for thousands of years to provide food for humans. In the British Museum, you can see actual loaves of bread that were made and baked in Egypt or Mitzrayim over 5,000 years ago using wheat. The growing of wheat is credited as the foundation for civilization. Wheat is native to the Middle East, and civilization as we know it originated there as well in the Fertile Crescent known as Mesopotamia. The link between the societies of ancient Babylon and Mesopotamia with wheat cannot be ignored. Without cultivation of such cereal grains, mankind would be forced to wander from region to region to hunt and gather wild food. Even nomadic lifestyles in the Middle East require wheat. Therefore, wheat is a symbol of civilization and of government, and is used as an icon for agriculture and produce to this day. In ancient Rome, bread was so important to daily life that bakers were recognized as freemen of the city. All other craftsmen were slaves. The Hebrew word for bread, which is lechem, comes directly from the term lachem, meaning to eat. This illustrates the importance of bread as substance to the Hebrews. In the scriptures, bread plays a deeply symbolic and spiritual role. Yahuwshuwa stated that he was the bread of life. Those who commemorate his death do so with bread and wine. YaHuWaH fed the Israelites with bread from the heavens in the wilderness. Yahuwshuwa said that he was the bread that came down from the heavens. His prayer to the Father clearly states, "Give us this day our daily portion of bread." The Torah states that man cannot live off of bread alone, but every word that comes forth from YaHuWaH, making a comparison with bread and the word. Bread was a required offering at the temple of YaHuWaH. There was always bread on display in the Kodesh chamber of the temple. According to Genesis chapter 3, verse 19, the first man, Adam or Adam, was the first to eat bread. Many of the feast days and Sabbaths are celebrated with bread. Bread has always played an important role in human life. Today, wheat is grown on more land area than any other food crop. In 2014, 220.4 million hectares on Earth were planted in wheat. World trade in wheat is greater than all other crops combined. In 2016, world production of wheat was 749 million tons, making it the second most produced cereal after maize. Since 1960, world production of wheat and other grain crops has tripled and is projected to grow further through the middle of the 21st century. Though wheat is such an important crop today, many cannot digest wheat products and are even told that wheat is harmful to their health. In the 1900s, man began making bread with synthetic yeast, which has now replaced the ancient process of using a sourdough starter. Sourdough starters remove harmful gluten from wheat products using fermentation. Bread made properly from sourdoughs can be made of wheat and yet gluten-free. Instead of having a bread that rises in a few hours, sourdoughs can take 24 hours. If fresh organic heirloom stone-ground wheat berries are used, more phytates are produced, reducing harmful phytic acid. This is the way that bread was made all over the world for thousands of years. This is the type of bread that Yahuwshuwa was speaking of. Most wheat products today are not processed correctly, leaving them full of anti-nutrients, and they are even toxic. If wheat is symbolic of the word of YaHuWaH, then this is also a living parable for us today. Man has tampered with the ancient system of growing wheat and making bread, just as he distorts the truth of YaHuWah's word. The Hebrew term for tares is zunim, in Greek zizania. The terms only appear in the scriptures in Matithyahu, Matthew chapter 13, in reference to the wheat and the tares parable. The Latin name for a tare is Lolilium timolentum, referring literally to bearded darnel, a species of ryegrass whose seeds carry a strong soporific poison. It is considered a weed which grows among grains, specifically in the Middle East amongst wheat. It bears the closest resemblance to wheat until the ear appears, and only then the difference is discovered. Instead of golden grain that can be used for food, the ears are long and the grains almost black. It is botanically related to wheat, but a poisonous fungus grows within its grain. It grows plentifully in Syria and Israel. When bearded darnel or zunim grows among wheat, the two grow with an intertwined root system, so that to uproot the weeds would destroy some of the wheat. Each grain of zunim must be removed before the grinding process begins with the wheat, or the bread will be bitter and poisonous. The grains resemble those of wheat, so that it is difficult to separate by sifting, and as a result, they were sometimes sown together with wheat mistakenly. This is why the servants ensured that the master had purchased zeratov, good seed. Nobody would consciously sow tares in their field. The Arabic cognates zawan or zuwan are apparently Syriac loanwords, meaning nausea or sickness, referring to sicknesses caused by digesting the ergot spur, a poisonous parasitic fungus that infects the zunim or bearded darnel kernels. It cannot be ingested without the serious effects of ergot poisoning, which can include convulsions, gangrenous loss of extremities, and death. The term darnel comes from the French language, meaning drunkenness, having earned this name as a result of its intoxicating effect when consumed. When darnel is ground into flour, baked in bread, and consumed while it is still hot, the eater may experience symptoms similar to drunkenness, including trembling, followed by an inability to walk, hindered speech, and vomiting. In addition, darnel is commonly infected again with the ergot fungus, which can cause hallucinations when consumed in small doses, but in large doses can do heavy damage to the central nervous system. The Greeks and Romans supposed that darnel and the fungus that was within it caused blindness. Therefore, the Romans even crafted an insult from the term darnel, lolio victare, meaning to live on darnel, a phrase which was applied to a dim-sighted or a short-sighted person. Though the tare is today classified as a type of ryegrass, Judaism understands zunim to be a degenerate form of wheat. This was determined long ago by the ancients. This is seen from the fact that in Mishnah Kilayim, in chapter 1, verse 1, wheat and zunim do not constitute mingled seeds with each other, in the sense of the scriptural requirement that diverse kinds of seeds must not be sown together in the same field, according to Leviticus, Vayikra, chapter 19, verse 19. And we know in the parable that the master of the field says, do not uproot the zunim, do not uproot the darnel. Therefore, it cannot constitute mingled seed. So Yahuwshuwa himself looked at zunim, or tares, which is bearded darnel, as a degenerative form of wheat. Again, it is botanically related to wheat, and we know this scientifically today. This is important to understand to comprehend the parable. It is vital to remember that the parable which Yahuwshuwa is illustrating here concerning the wheat and the tares is a direct comparison which he is making with Malchut Hashemayim, the kingdom, the reign of the heavens. Yahuwshuwa often taught, proclaiming Malchut Hashemayim, the kingdom, the reign of the heavens, is at hand. Yahuwshuwa expressed in this parable that the Malchut, the reign of YaHuWaH, already had a present reality by saying, Malchut Hashemayim, the kingdom, the reign of the heavens, has become like a man who went forth to sow good seed in his field. The term kingdom in English means a king and his dominion or jurisdiction, the territory or country that is subject to that king or supreme ruler, an undivided territory under the dominion of a monarch. In scripture, the government or universal dominion of YaHuWaH is Malchut. It is a reign, a kingdom. The very term Malchut comes from the word Melech, meaning a sovereign ruler or a king, literally. YaHuWaH is the Melech. He is the supreme ruler of heaven and earth. He is the creator of everything. Therefore, he is an absolute monarch, an absolute Melech. The term Melech, again, which means a supreme ruler or a king, gives us the very term Malchut, which means the empire or the kingdom in which that supreme ruler rules over. Therefore, in the Hebrew mind, a kingdom or reign is identified by the ruler who rules over it. Melech, again, meaning a supreme ruler, is also related to the term in Hebrew that is malach, meaning a messenger. This term has often been mistranslated as an angel. Now, we have to understand this because the term malach implies an empire as well. The term malach means an envoy, one who is sent forth, an ambassador. Malachim, or messengers, are spiritual beings who communicate the word of YaHuWaH to mankind. This is very important also because all of these terms imply the dominion of YaHuWaH. All kingdoms contain a supreme ruler, a realm, a territory of rulership, a people, a language, culture, and law. The law of YaHuWaH was delivered to his servant Moshe in the presence of over 1 million Israelites in the wilderness on the way to the promised land. This law is called the Torah, the everlasting word of YaHuWaH, the instructions, the principles. The Torah serves as the legal constitution for the reign of YaHuWaH forever. Monarchy was the most common form of government until the 19th century, but it is no longer prevalent. Where it exists, it is now usually a constitutional monarchy, in which the monarch or king retains a unique legal and ceremonial role only, but exercises limited or no official political power whatsoever under the written or unwritten constitution. Others have governing authority in those kingdoms today. Absolute monarchy, however, is a form of monarchy in which one ruler has supreme authority and where that authority is not restricted by any written laws, legislator, or customs. YaHuWaH is the giver of Torah. He is the giver of the instructions. He is not limited by the instructions which he has given. He will not act outside the law which he has given. However, he is an absolute supreme monarch over heaven and earth, and there is nothing that is outside of his dominion or jurisdiction. In the scriptures, 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verse 10, and David Baruch YaHuWaH before all the assembly. And David said, Baruch are you, or blessed are you, YaHuWaH, Elohim of Yisrael, our Father, forever and ever. Yours, O YaHuWaH, is the greatness, the power, and the comeliness, the preeminence, and the excellency, because of all that is in the Shemayim, the heavens, and in the earth. Yours is the Malchut, the reign, O YaHuWaH, and you are exalted as head above all. And the riches and the esteem come from your presence, and you rule over all. And in your hand is power and might, and in your hand to make great and to give strength to all. And now, our Elohim, we thank you and praise your comely name. In the Tehillim, Psalm chapter 24, we read in verse 10, who is this sovereign of esteem? Melech HaKabod, the sovereign of all esteem. YaHuWaH Sabaoth, YaHuWaH of hosts or armies. He is the sovereign of esteem or kabod. Selah, pause and meditate. That is what the term Selah means. We are to think upon the fact that YaHuWaH is the great sovereign of all esteem who has created all, and there is nothing or anyone who is not in his jurisdiction. He will be the supreme judge over all flesh, over all mankind, and over all heavenly beings that he has created. The idea of a Malchut, or a reign, is very foreign from the Western mind today, because we see in the Western mind ideas such as democracy, socialism, etc. We see these concepts where people rule, a majority rules, whereas YaHuWaH is the supreme ruler. What he says is the only law, and no one can oppose him, and no one can come against what he has spoken. It will be forever because YaHuWaH has declared it. However, when you have a democracy, if you have a majority of wicked people, then wicked laws will be made and enforced. However, YaHuWaH's law is eternal. It can never be altered. This is important. YaHuWaH is not a communist, a socialist. He is not about democracy. YaHuWaH is about supreme rulership. And we, in this time, in the 21st century, need to understand and humble ourselves before the Melech HaOlam, the King of the universe, the King of the ages, whose name is YaHuWaH. Though the students of Yahuwshuwa knew him intimately and heard all of his teachings and broke bread with him and saw all of his miracles, and though they lived in that same agrarian society 2,000 years ago in the land of Yehuda or Judea and knew full well the difference between the wheat and the tares, though they knew all this, they did not have the understanding of the mashal, of the wise saying of Yahuwshuwa of the parable, and therefore they asked Yahuwshuwa for the interpretation. Matithyahu, Matthew chapter 13, beginning in verse 36. Then, having sent the crowds away, Yahuwshuwa went into the house, and his taught ones came to him, saying, Explain to us the parable of the darnel of the field. And he answering said to them, He who is sowing Zaratov, the good seed, is the Ben Adam, the son of Adam, and the field is the world. And the good seed, Zaratov, these are Bnei HaMalchut, the sons of the reign or kingdom. But the darnel are the sons of the wicked one. And the enemy who sowed them is Hashatan, or the Satan, the devil. And the harvest is the end of the age. And the reapers are the Malachim, the messengers. As the darnel then is gathered and burned in the fire, so it shall be at the end of this age. The Ben Adam, the son of Adam, shall send out his Malachim, his messengers, and they shall gather out of his reign, his Malchut, all the stumbling blocks, and those doing lawlessness, and shall throw them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous shall shine forth as the sun in the reign of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Yahuwshuwa reveals that he is the one who went forth sowing Zaratov, the good seed, in his field. He refers to himself often using the Hebrew expression Ben Adam, which means the son of Adam, the son of man. And this is extremely important because it is a prophetic title found within the Hebrew Tanakh, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, commonly referred to as the Old Testament. And this title implies the coming of the Messiah. When we look at literature amongst the Yahudim, the Jews, during that time period, we will even see that many of their writings outside of the scriptures reference the Messiah as the Ben Adam, as the son of man. So this is important because Yahuwshuwa is using this title to describe himself for those who have ears to hear and eyes to see, so that when they hear these terminologies, they remember the scriptures. We also see the Aramaic equivalent to Ben Adam, which is Bar Enosh, which means the son of man as well, in the book of Daniel chapter 7, in a very important passage of scripture, a very important prophecy. In verse 13, we read, I was looking in the night visions and saw one like the Bar Enosh, like the son of man, coming with the clouds of the heavens. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Now what is happening here is that the son Yahuwshuwa is being presented to his Father who is in the heavens. The Ancient of Days is a title that is referring to YaHuWaH, who is the creator of heaven and earth, the great I am, the one who sits on the highest throne. There is no authority greater than his. So Yahuwshuwa, the Son who submits to the Father, presents himself
to the Father in the heavens. And verse 14 says this, and to him was given rulership and preciousness and a reign. When the Messiah of Israel, Yahuwshuwa, resurrected from the grave because it could not hold him, he ascended into the heavens and presented himself to his Father. Then he came back to the earth and presented himself to his Talmudim, to his students, 3 days and 3 nights later. And he declared to them that all authority had been given to him. He says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and in earth. Before he ever went to the Father, he told his students, you should rejoice that I go to the Father, because the Father is greater than I am. Because Yahuwshuwa loved the Father, he worships the Father, and he prays and submits to the Father in heavens. And the Father who is in the heavens bestowed upon his Son the kingdom of YaHuWaH, Malchut YaHuWaH, which is often called Malchut Hashemayim, the kingdom, the reign of the heavens. There is only one kingdom of YaHuWaH. Now, this is very important because it says, and to him was given rulership and preciousness and a reign, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His rule is an everlasting rule, which shall not pass away, and his reign, that which shall not be destroyed. So Yahuwshuwa is the Son of Man, and this terminology, Bar Enosh, also refers to his position of power in the government of YaHuWaH, because you see how it illustrates here that he is a Son of Man, implying that he has the authority to rule over mankind, because YaHuWaH has given him the great authority. Now, Yahuwshuwa went forth sowing good seed, he says, Zarah Tov, and he calls the good seed the B'nai HaMalchut, the children of the reign, the children of the kingdom. That term kingdom actually doesn't even express fully what Malchut truly means. Because every time you think of a kingdom, you think of a heathenistic kingdom with a pagan religion. However, when you look at the scriptures, what you see is pure righteousness, and it is the unadulterated worship of YaHuWaH, and his government is based upon the principles of YaHuWah's Torah, his instructions. So the B'nai HaMalchut, the children of the kingdom, are submitting themselves to the authority of YaHuWaH because they guard his word, and they have the testimony of his Son, because it was his Son who planted them. He was the one who went forth and planted the B'nai HaMalchut, the children of the kingdom. And he likens them to wheat, which again is one of the most important crops that man has ever cultivated. When we think of society and civilization, many people attribute the growth of civilization to the growing of wheat, because wheat was such an important crop for mankind. So wheat, therefore, is a symbol of government, of power, of authority, and of civilization. It is also a picture of the obvious, which is nourishment and bread, because you take the golden grain of wheat and you grind it and you make the delicious substance which we all know as bread. And this substance has been used to feed mankind since the very beginning, when Adam ate bread, according to the scriptures. So therefore, it is very important to understand these concepts. Furthermore, when wheat is getting ready for the harvest and the golden grain is ripening within its head, we see that it begins to bow over because of the weight of the grain that is in its head. Now, if the grain is symbolic of the word of YaHuWaH, as we have already discovered, because YaHuWaH said, man shall not live off of bread alone, but every single word that proceeds from the mouth of YaHuWaH. And then he fed the Israelites with bread from the heavens in the wilderness. And Yahuwshuwa comes into the world saying, I am the bread who came down from the heavens. We see clearly that he is the word of YaHuWaH. So therefore, again, the concept of the bread of YaHuWaH and the word of YaHuWaH are synonymous in the scriptures. So what we see is happening here in a spiritual level is that the grain is beginning to humble itself before the creator of the universe because of the weight of the word that is growing within its head. In other words, the children of the kingdom are growing in the kingdom. They are growing in the word of YaHuWaH. And because of the heaviness of the weight of YaHuWah's word, it begins to put them in a state of humbleness, of repentance, and of worship before the Creator of all. And this is very, very important to comprehend, because that is what the word of YaHuWaH does. It refines the human being, it puts them in a state of repentance, and it puts them in a state of humility. That is the purpose. However, the scriptures tell us that there was a sabotage that took place, and we have to understand how this took place. But first, we need to look at the book of Daniel yet again, Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, and read further about the B'nai HaMalchut, the children of the reign of YaHuWaH. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, we read, "And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will wake up." This is the resurrection. The scriptures teach resurrection. That is what the scriptures teach. That there is a resurrection for the righteous, and there is even another resurrection for the wicked. It says, "And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will wake up, some to everlasting life," which is the message that Yahuwshuwa taught, that we would have everlasting life if we put our belief, our emunah, our endurance in Him. And then it says, "And some to reproaches, everlasting abhorrence," which is horrible. No human being wants to face the judgment that is coming upon the wicked. Verse 3 reads, "And those who have insight shall shine like the brightness of the expanse, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever." And remember Yahuwshuwa, when he explained the parable, and he explained that the wheat would be brought into his granary, he says that the righteous will shine forth in that day. And he is essentially quoting the book of Daniel, chapter 12. And again, it says, "And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will wake up, some to everlasting life, some to reproaches, everlasting abhorrence. And those who have insight shall shine like the brightness of the expanse. And those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever." Now, in the parable, Yahuwshuwa describes that the good man, who is the Ben Adam, the son of Adam, Yahuwshuwa HaMashiach, went forth sowing Zeratov, good seed, in his field. But while men slept, an enemy comes along and sabotages the wheat. What does it mean, while men slept? Well, we just read in the book of Daniel a great example of the idea of sleeping in Scripture. You see, it says in Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, the verse we just read, it says, "And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will wake up." In other words, many of those who are dead. Yahuwshuwa, when he referred to Lazarus being dead, he told his students, "Lazarus is sleeping." And they didn't understand what he meant. So eventually he has to say, "Lazarus is dead." And he went there and he rose Eleazar, which is Lazarus, from the grave by the word of YaHuWaH. But he used that metaphor. And in the parable, it should be understood in the same way. You see, the men who slept, and that sleeping allowed the enemy to come in and sabotage the field, is literally when the first disciples, the early apostles, the shlechem of Yahuwshuwa, when they died, they passed from this earth. You see, while the disciples, the Talmudim, while they still walked the earth, they wrote how the mystery of iniquity was already at work. That term iniquity in the Greek is anomia, which means without law, lawless. The mystery of lawlessness was already at work. And they wrote there in their letters how there were already many heresies that had infiltrated the early believers. And then we see that the Roman Empire eventually, supposedly, converts and believes in the Messiah of Israel, and they become the Holy Roman Catholic Empire. And this is just the fermentation of that apostasy coming to the fullness. Because the Roman Catholic Church is an abomination to YaHuWaH. And all Protestants who claim to be Protestants today are nothing more than the daughters of that whore assembly known as the Roman Catholic Church. They have stemmed out of that system, therefore they maintain the same dogmas and traditions, such as keeping Sunday instead of the Sabbath day, and such as keeping Ishtar and Easter instead of the Passover, and all the unspeakable abominations that they engage in, such as eating unclean animals, all types of things that they do, and they say they have the right to do these things. They are without law. You see, the great heresy infiltrated, the mystery of iniquity infiltrated, even while the disciples were alive. But when they slept, all of a sudden, the overseers of the assembly of YaHuWaH, through Yahuwshuwa HaMashiach, those overseers who used to be all Yahudim, who were all Jews, all the fellow kinsmen of Yahuwshuwa who were his direct students, suddenly all of the overseers of these assemblies began to be Gentiles. And they brought their Gnostic ideas of their pagan religions that they formerly had into the belief. And today, in the 21st century, you can hardly recognize the teachings of Messiah amongst those who supposedly claim to have his name and his truth, which call themselves Christians. So therefore, we see that Christianity is a direct result of the fact that the evil one, who is the Satan, went forth and sowed tares amongst the wheat while men slept. While men slept. Because those disciples did not call themselves Christians, they were Nazarene. They were offshoots. They were watchmen. That's what the term means. And that is critical to comprehend. Now, the concept of the tare is not just specific to the Christian. It is specific to many people who claim to have the Messiah or claim to have the truth of the kingdom in these last days. But first, let us look at what took place. It says that the Satan, Hashatan, went forth. The devil, he went forth and he sowed the tares while the men slept. Now, we have to understand, who is this Satan? Who is Hashatan? First of all, Hashatan, the Satan, is not a name, because you never put a definite article in front of a name. Shaitan refers to the role that this messenger, who is a spiritual being that lived in the heavenly realm of YaHuWaH, who is cast out for rebellion, it explains his role, because the term Satan or Shaitan in Hebrew literally means an adversary and an accuser, used also as a verb, and it can specifically mean an adversary in war or an accuser in court. This is the position which the Satan has. Very important. Now, our first introduction to this Satan individual is in the garden, when we see that the serpent beguiled Hawa, who is called Eve, and confused her and essentially talked her into eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And how did he do it? He did it by manipulating the words of YaHuWaH. He asked her, has Elohim truly said that you will die if you eat of this fruit? He questioned her using the word. That is what the Satan does. He takes the word of YaHuWaH, he twists it and confuses the hearers. And that is why there are thousands of isms and schisms out there in Christianity. That is why there are so many divisions in these last days amongst those who say they believe in the Messiah, Israel. Now, further, what takes place when someone sows tares amongst wheat? Well, first of all, as we already explained, one cannot really tell with the naked eye what is taking place until the grain head begins to form. Then, all of a sudden, it's very, very clear. Because what will happen is that wheat will be full of that beautiful golden grain that we all know makes the delicious bread, the nourishment of life, the word of YaHuWaH. However, the tare, the darnel, the zunim, it produces a seed head that is not full. It has small, tiny, poisonous seeds. And because of this, it does not bow. It does not make repentance. It does not have humility before YaHuWaH. It does not worship YaHuWaH. It does not submit to YaHuWaH. Instead, the tare will grow upright. It will be tall and proud. And it will be darker than the wheat. And again, its head is full of poison, not the word of YaHuWaH, but full of poison. If a human consumes it, they will get sick. They could possibly even die. Zunim were even used in witchcraft. The darnel heads were used in witchcraft in ancient Babylon, all over the world, to poison people and do all kinds of wickedness. So that idea of darnel is also synonymous with the idea of witchcraft and with the idea of rebellion. You see, what took place there, if the wheat are the B'nai HaMalchut, the children of the kingdom, what took place is that kingdom was invaded. It was invaded by tares, who are called the children of the wicked one. Literally, B'nai Harashim, the children of the wicked. In the Hebrew Matthew, it just calls them the wicked ones. So the difference between the wheat and the tares at harvest time is that the wheat, again, it bows, it repents, it loves YaHuWaH, submits to YaHuWah's word, and it does this because of the heaviness of the Torah, the heaviness of the commandments that are within it. It's telling them to bow before the creator of the universe. However, the tare has no word of YaHuWaH within it. It is lawless, and it does not bow, and it is poison. That is very important because the kingdom of YaHuWaH has been invaded on the earth by these types of individuals, lawless individuals. Okay, so this is extremely important. Now we have to look at the concept of harvest. The concept of harvest is used throughout scriptures to describe the end of the age. It's not just used by Yahuwshuwa, it's used by YaHuWaH throughout the Tanakh. One great example is in the book of Joel, where YaHuWaH uses the example of the grape harvest to describe the destruction of the wicked. So we see that it is a very complex parable. However, it is something that we should already be very familiar with because YaHuWaH uses these same types of terminology throughout the scriptures. When we look at Matthew chapter 3, we see that Yahuchanan, John, who is called the Baptist by people, but he is the immerser, we see that this is what he says about Yahuwshuwa in verse 12 of chapter 3 in Matthew. He says, his winnowing fork is in his hand, and he shall thoroughly cleanse his threshing floor and gather his wheat into the storehouse. But the chaff he shall burn with unquenchable fire. This sounds very much like the parable of the wheat and the tares. However, Yahuchanan is using a different analogy. Instead of using tares, which are darnel, he is now using the idea of chaff, and he talks about a winnowing fork. And most people have no concept of what this is referring to. When wheat is harvested, especially in the ancient world, in ancient Israel, it was harvested by sickles. And this was very time-consuming and very labor-intensive. When the wheat was harvested, it had to be brought to a large pavement called the threshing floor. And when it was brought to the threshing floor, it would be laid out, and large boards that had stones under them would be laid on top of the wheat, and young children would sit on these boards, and donkeys would pull them around on the pavement. And what would take place is that the friction that took place would actually separate the wheat berries from the rest that cannot be consumed, which we call chaff, the straw. And so what would take place then is that the farmer would take a winnowing fork, and he would use this fork to throw the chaff up in the air. And the breeze would come along, and the word for wind in Hebrew is ruach, which is the same word as spirit. It's very symbolic here. The spirit, the wind would come along, and it would blow the chaff away as the farmer continued to throw it in the air. And what would happen is that eventually what you'd be left with is wheat berries on the ground, and the chaff would be separated in a whole different pile, ready to burn, because they did not waste anything. They used these things for fuel, and it was very, very important to have the chaff for that reason. However, here the analogy is that the wheat, again, the wheat are the B'nai Malchut, the children of the kingdom, but the chaff is now a symbol of the tares. They're going to be burned with fire. Same kind of analogy, very important to understand. Isaiah, Yeshayahu, chapter 5, verse 24. Therefore, as a tongue of fire devours the stubble, and the flame consumes the chaff, their root is as rottenness, and their blossom goes up like dust, because they have rejected the Torah. Now the term Torah, it again is the law, the instructions of YaHuWaH. These are the laws that YaHuWaH gave to his servant Moshe. Sometimes you will even see it called the Torah of Moshe or Moses. But it's truly the Torah of YaHuWaH, and the Torah, the instructions, the law of his Kodesh Malchut, his Kodesh kingdom, his set-apart kingdom that is coming. And he says, he compares the people who are going to be burned up like chaff because they hated the word of YaHuWaH. It says, because they have rejected the Torah of YaHuWaH, Sabotaged, YaHuWaH of the armies, of the host, and despised the word of the Kodesh one of Yisrael. They despise his Debar. And remember, Yahuwshuwa is the word made flesh. That is why people hated him when he walked the earth. That is why people hate him today. He is the manifestation of the word of YaHuWaH. Malachi chapter 4, verse 1 reads, "For look, the day shall come burning like a furnace, and all the proud and every wrongdoer shall be stubble. And the day that shall come shall burn them up, says YaHuwah of hosts, which leaves to them neither root nor branch." This concept of burning the wicked is embedded throughout the prophets. YaHuwah has been warning people on and on and on for generation and generation, because he will not do such a thing to the wicked unless he gave them fair warning. And he is giving them fair warning even in this day. In the book of Proverbs, now the book of Proverbs, again, the term mishle comes from mashal, meaning a parable. So these aren't just proverbs, these are parables, just like the parables that Yahuwshuwa gave. He was in that culture that was very familiar with parables. King Solomon, Shlomo, wrote the book of the Mishle, most of the Mishlim, the Proverbs. And in chapter 2, verse 21, we read, "For the straight shall dwell in the earth, and the perfect be left in it. But the wrong shall be cut off from the earth." The King James Version translates it to be uprooted from the earth. Sounds very similar to what Yahuwshuwa is teaching. It says, "But the wrong shall be cut off from the earth, and the treacherous ones plucked up out of it." So here we see this concept. However, this is very different from what Christianity has taught you. Christianity teaches you that you die, you go to heaven, the kingdom is in heaven, the kingdom will always be in heaven. Yahuwshuwa, however, taught that the kingdom of heaven was coming to this earth. He taught us when we pray, "Our Father who is in the heavens, Kodesh, set apart, sanctified is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in the heavens." Yahuwshuwa said, "The meek shall inherit the earth." Why would they inherit something on earth if they are not going to be on the earth? It's because there is such a misunderstanding about all of Yahuwshuwa's teachings. There is such an illiteracy that has taken place concerning the scriptures. Though it is the most popular book of all time, no one dares to understand what is written in its pages. 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 23 is very important. It says, "For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and stubbornness is the wickedness of idolatry." Very important, because what ultimately is taking place within the Malchut, within the kingdom, is that, again, there was an invasion that was planted by a wicked one, the Satan, the one who accused mankind in the very beginning. He is now doing it at the end of the age. But what is he doing? He planted darnel seeds, which were used in witchcraft in ancient Babylon. And he instigated a rebellion. Those who are in the kingdom as tares are there illegally. They are occupying territory that is not their own. Therefore, they are in rebellion, and rebellion is the sin of divination or witchcraft, and stubbornness is as the wickedness of idolatry. And the Torah says that you do not suffer a witch or a wizard to live. That is why there's a coming judgment. YaHuWaH will judge all flesh according to the righteousness that is found within the pages of his word that he gave to the children of Israel. And he's expressed it throughout the prophets, and he confirmed it by the mouth of his only brought forth son, Yahuwshuwa the Messiah. Now, when we think about this concept, we see many similar concepts in the scriptures. For instance, Nadab and Abihu, who were the sons of Aharon or Aaron, the chief priest, the Kohen Hagadol. You see, these were priests, Nadab and Abihu, and they were called by YaHuWaH to present incense before him. But when they did, they brought strange fire. And YaHuWaH consumed them. They had a little bit of truth. They had the incense. But they did something along the way that was strange in the eyes of YaHuWaH. And that term strange, or zur, means of the foreign nations. They did something that came from other nations, some pagan heathen religion. They mixed a little bit of that in with the truth. And YaHuWaH consumed them in the fire, because he does not tolerate mixture and confusion. When we look at rat poison, which is a great example for us in the 21st century today, we will see that 98% of rat poison is literal food. 2% approximately is the poison. It only takes a small amount of the poison to ultimately cause damage and death. Also, we see another example in Judas Iscariot, who is Yehuda Ishkarioth. He was one of the 12 disciples, chosen by Yahuwshuwa himself. Yet he broke bread with him, saw all of his miracles, saw all these things, and he still betrayed him. That is what the terror does today. The terror is occupying your territory, invading your space, and robbing you of nutrients ultimately with the goal of turning you in, turning you over, and overthrowing the kingdom of YaHuWaH. Now, does the tare know this? I don't believe they do. Because you see, they're planted in the kingdom of the field. They believe they're children of the kingdom, but they're robbing your nutrients. And they're entangling their root systems with you. They have learned to talk like you. They learn to talk and walk and act like children of the reign of YaHuWaH. They may use Hebrew words like shalom. They may wear tzitziot. They may do all types of commandments. They might call on the name of YaHuWaH and Yahushua. They might even use those proper names. But they're still tares. You see, Satan knows the name of YaHuWaH. He knows the exact pronunciation. He's known it for thousands and thousands of years. It's no big mystery to him. He knows the name of Yahushua. He knows this name very, very well, because all of his demons would tremble before Yahushua when he was walking on the earth, and they still tremble at his great and awesome name, and Shaitan himself trembles at it. They know the name. They know the pronunciation. They could even say it. We see in the scriptures a man tried to cast out demons, and he tried to do it in the name of Yahushua. The demons responded, "We know Shaul, who's called Paul, and we know Yahushua, but we don't know who you are." And they attacked him. They knew the name and they could utter the name. So therefore, just because you know the name, it's not enough, because YaHuWaH says that he is near to all those who call upon him, all those who call upon his name in truth. Truth is a requirement. In these last days, you are going to notice that the entire Malchut seems to be in chaos. People are going and doing what is right in their own eyes. They have concocted fake Sabbaths, fake names. They have concocted all kinds of traditions that they have claimed to gather from ancient Hebrew sources. However, it is not enough to have Hebrew roots, because we see that many wicked people had Hebrew roots. Judas Iscariot, his name is Yehuda. He was a Jew. He had Hebrew roots. It's not enough to have Hebrew roots. You have to have the Ruach of YaHuWaH, the spirit, the wind and breath of YaHuWaH. You have to have the testimony of Yahushua and call on the name of YaHuWaH in truth. Don't just give lip service to his name. That is what people are doing. And that is why the Malchut seems to be insane in these last days. You see so many crazy doctrines, so many crazy teachings that are just coming up out of nowhere. This is because the darnel is standing up tall, and the darnel is loud and proud, and it wants to share its poison with anyone who will give it place. And it wants to rob the nutrients from the wheat and stunt its growth and hinder the harvest. That is what the tares are doing, and these tares are human beings. Many people want to teach that they're not human beings. They're some type of creature, some type of soulless being, like one of the Nephilim or something to that effect. But those of you who know what I'm talking about, or those of you who don't, go look at Genesis chapter 6. That's what people are trying to say. That is not what it's talking about. These are talking about people. And we know this because of the context of the scriptures and what is being said. Yahushua is warning about people who will infiltrate the assembly in the last days, who will sneak in unaware, undetected, and you won't realize until their fruit begins to form the closer we get to harvest. That is why the closer we get to the Son of Man coming, the crazier and crazier we see these doctrines become. You hear the wildest things come out of the mouth of some of these people in these last days. Evil, wicked things that should not be taught. Heresies that the first century believers dealt with even then, we are dealing with even now. There are Torah teachers out there who will even tell you that more than half of the Torah has been done away with. Conveniently, those laws that have to do with sexual immorality and what you should or shouldn't eat, those types of things, have all completely been done away with, according to some of these false teachers out here in these days. So we are in a state of chaos in the kingdom because there are wheat, the true Malchut, the true children of the rain, but they are mixed all together with these darnel, and the darnel is overtaking, it seems. But they will not succeed in the end. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 18. For in the first place, I hear that when you come together as an assembly, there be divisions among you. And to some extent, I believe it. For there have to be factions even among you, so that the approved ones might be revealed among you. So therefore, this has to take place so that the wheat can be made manifest. The true bread of YaHuWaH can be made manifest on the earth in these last days. Those tares, those darnel, the zunim, they are the ones that the scriptures describe, that they are ever learning but never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. Again, they may use the same name you use. They may sit down and break bread with you on the Sabbath or during the Passover or during the various festivals. But they are plotting to rob you of your nutrients, to invade you of your space, and ultimately they are in rebellion to overthrow the kingdom of YaHuWaH. Matith Yahu, Matthew chapter 24, verse 29. And immediately after the distress, immediately after the tribulation, as the King James Version words it, and immediately after the tribulation, the distress of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give its light, and the stars shall fall from the heavens, and the power of the heavens shall be shaken. And then the sign of the Ben Adam, the son of Adam, shall appear in the heavens. When? After the tribulation. It says it right in the context, not before, like the Christian church teaches. Erroneously, they don't read the word. They are not full of the grain head. They do not have this truth. Therefore, what you hear out of their mouth concerning this is poison. They say that they will be whisked away just out of nowhere. They will never have to go through tribulation, even though the Messiah of Israel had to lay down his life and all of his disciples were executed. Because they were enemies of the government of the world, because they preached the government of YaHuWaH. It says, and then the sign of the son of Adam, the Ben Adam, shall appear in the heavens, and then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn when they see the sign of the son of Adam coming on the clouds of the heavens with power and much esteem. And he shall send his Malachim, his messengers. This has been erroneously translated angels. When you think of an angel in the Western world, you think about these feminine beings with halos. That is not what the scriptures are teaching at all. So far from the truth. These are spiritual beings, yes, but they are not feminine beings with halos. It says, and he shall send his messengers, his malachim, with the great sound of a trumpet, with a shofar, and they shall gather together his chosen ones from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. And they sound that shofar because it is the sound of the ingathering and is also the sound of the march to war, because Yahuwshuwa and his armies are coming to the earth because the earth is in rebellion against the government of YaHuWaH, and YaHuWaH will overthrow them in their rebellion, in their witchcraft. Remember, the scriptures compare rebellion to witchcraft. This is very important. This all happens after the tribulation. The elect are gathered. The wheat is gathered after the tribulation. But remember what Yahuwshuwa said. But first, you bind the darnel and burn them. Now, let's go to Luke. Luke is chapter 17, verse 34. This is one of those verses that the Christian church uses to support this thing they call the rapture, where they will just be whisked away off of planet Earth before anything bad ever happens. Even though you have believers in the Messiah being beheaded all over the Middle East, the Western Christian church still maintains that before any tribulation comes, they will disappear. And this is one of the verses they use. In Luke chapter 17, verse 34, I say to you, in that night there shall be two in one bed, and one shall be taken and the other one left. Two shall be grinding together, the one shall be taken and the other one left. Two shall be in the field, the one shall be taken, the other one left. And they answering said to him, Where, Master? However, the Christian church will never read this verse to you. They always stop after the one was taken and the other one left. And they explain that the ones who are left behind are those who didn't make it in the rapture, and they're going to be forced to go through the great tribulation and all these things. Erroneous teachings. It says in the context, the students were very wise that heard Yahuwshuwa say this, and they answered and said to him, Where, Master? Where will they be taken? This is what Yahuwshuwa says. And he said to them, Where the body is, there also the eagles shall be gathered together. That's what the English says. When you go into the Greek and the Aramaic, however, you will see that it literally is saying, where their corpse is, there the buzzards will be gathered together. Again, that is what the Hebrew and Aramaic literally say. Now, what is this talking about? Revelation 19:11. And I saw the heavens open. Same kind of situation. Remember, Yahuwshuwa said, after the tribulation, then you will see the sign of the Son of Man coming. And here it is. And I saw the heavens open, and there was a white horse, and he who sat on him was called Trustworthy and True. And in righteousness he judges and fights. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, having a name that had been written that no man perceived but himself. And having been dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called Hadabar YaHuWaH, the word of YaHuWaH. This is Yahuwshuwa. And the armies in the heavens, dressed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword. Now this is likened to the sickle, which he will use to harvest the wheat. The word of YaHuWaH. Out of his mouth goes forth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron. And he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of El Shaddai, which is YaHuWaH. And on his robe and on his banner he has a name written, Sovereign of Sovereigns and Master of Masters. This banner was given to him by his father YaHuWaH. And in verse 17 it says, and I saw one messenger, one Malchut, standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly in mid-heaven, come and gather together for the supper of the great Elohim, to eat the flesh of sovereigns, and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of strong ones, and the flesh of horses, and those who sit on them, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, both small and great. You see, the armies of the world will gather against Jerusalem in the last days, and Yahuwshuwa will come to defend his land and defend his people. And he will feed the flesh of the kings and the armies and the commanders, the great and the small. He will feed their flesh to the birds of the heavens. That's what it says in the scriptures. It says to eat the flesh of sovereigns and the flesh of commanders and the flesh of strong ones and the flesh of horses and those who sit on them, and on the flesh of all people, free and slave, both small and great. Now, why does this all take place? What is the difference between the wheat and the tare? How can we understand the difference? Lawlessness. Remember, Yahuwshuwa specifically said, after he gives the parable, he says that the messengers will gather out of his reign, out of his Malchut, out of his kingdom, all those who are stumbling blocks, meaning they cause others to transgress the covenant, and all those who are lawless, anomia in the Greek, without law or iniquity. In 1 John chapter 3, verse 4, we read, everyone doing sin also does lawlessness. Anomia in the Greek, they are lawless. And sin is lawlessness. You see, the Christian church teaches you don't have to keep the commandments. And then there are people who say you have to keep the commandments, but they've made their own fake Sabbaths and their own fake calendars. And they have their own teachings, and they make all these things up, and they use Satan himself as a messenger of light to give them these poisonous teachings that they're spreading throughout the earth. They are nothing more than darnel. Lawlessness, lawlessness. It's not enough to say that you keep the law. You have to obey it. That's the way it works. Matthew chapter 7, verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the heavens, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in the heavens. Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? Verse 23 is so important. Then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Never. I never knew you. Not once when you did those works in my name. Not once when you said you cast out a demon in my name. Not once when you did anything in my name did I ever know you. He says, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work iniquity, you who work lawlessness, you who are without the Torah, without the instructions of YaHuWaH. You see, in the book of Revelation, it is very clear that those who will eat from the tree of life In the kingdom of YaHuWaH are those who have the testimony of Yahuwshuwa and keep the commandments of YaHuWaH. We have to have both. We have to keep the commandments of YaHuWaH. Yahuwshuwa said, "Think not that I came to destroy the law and the prophets. I did not come to destroy the law and the prophets, but to fulfill. For verily I say to you that heaven and earth shall pass away, but this word will never pass away. Not one jot or tittle shall in no means pass away from the Torah till all be fulfilled." Brothers and sisters, and all of you who are hearing my voice, the heavens and the earth has not passed away. The Torah remains. It is the law of the kingdom. And if you are not maintaining the law of the kingdom, then you have invaded the kingdom with the purpose of rebellion and overthrowing the kingdom, and therefore you shall be treated as one who has done high treason. At the time when the Son of Man appears, you claim to be a part of the kingdom of YaHuWaH. You claim to know him, yet you strayed from his word. You may have learned a lot of Hebrew. You may, again, have learned to talk like us and to walk like us and to act like us. But at the end of the day, you will always be a tare, robbing nutrients from the true wheat of YaHuWaH. As the day of the harvest grows closer, we will see that these false doctrines will get crazier and crazier, and that the Dharna will stand up loud and proud, and that it will be dark and full of the poisonous heads. However, we will see that the wheat will be setting itself in order, bowing before YaHuWaH in true repentance, making teshuvah, turning back to YaHuWaH the Father in the heavens, and obeying his commandments, because they follow the Messiah, the King of Israel. And the King of Israel never taught to break his laws, the laws of the Father in the heavens. This is supremely important for your comprehension in these last days, so that you understand what it is that you are seeing when you see all these people that you thought you knew who were calling on the name, or they were actually seeming to walk a straight and narrow path, and then all of a sudden some heresy came their way and they began to manifest, and you saw that all of a sudden something had shifted, something had changed. They looked like wheat before, but now they look like a tare. Before it looked like they were going to produce golden grain that could produce bread, but now you see that all that is coming out of them is poison and heresies and teachings of blasphemy that are confusing and confounding the people in these last days. There is a separation at hand, a separation that is about to take place, because Yahuwshuwa, HaMashiach, the Messiah, he will return very, very soon. YaHuWaH be with the true wheat, the true elite, the true B'nai HaMalchut during this time, because it will be very difficult in your walk. You will have those who are the Judas Iscariot, who will come into your life, who will break bread with you but will trade you in for silver pieces, who will mock you and scorn you. You have those amongst you who are the Nadab and Abihu, those false priests who are going to offer up mixed worship before YaHuWaH, and they'll be consumed in the fire. Don't follow after them. Do not perish in the rebellion of Korach like he did against Moses in the wilderness, but cling to the teachings of Yahuwshuwa and be prepared for the harvest which is at hand.